Hello again, and welcome back to another edition of GNAT-TV's In-Depth series. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director here at GNAT-TV's News Project, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Today is Tuesday, November 20th, and our subject of today is hemp. Biological cousin of somewhat better known material, but hemp, as many of you know, is a building material and has many other uses that have been found throughout history, going back quite a ways into history, and may be poised for a bit of a rebound here in Vermont as an agricultural product that might wind up benefiting the agricultural sector of the state's economy. With us today to talk a little bit about hemp and some of its practical applications are two gentlemen from Dorset. Architect Bob Escher, celebrating his 30th year as an architect, and his son Alex Escher. Gentlemen, great to have you with us today, and thank you for making the time to be here and tell us a little about this. So just to get us started, tell us a little bit about hemp. I know a lot of misconceptions probably out there about it, from the biological standpoint and everything, but what exactly is hemp?
Hemp is one of the oldest crops cultivated by humans throughout the development of human civilization. While hemp is not a major part of the American economy right now, that wasn't always the case. Thomas Jefferson actually considered hemp as well as tobacco to be the economic and agricultural foundation for the emerging New England colonies. They've actually found remnants of hemp fabric in Mesopotamia, which that was dated back to, I believe, 8,000 BC. So in the grand scheme of things, hemp has been around with humans for quite some time, and many consider it the fact that it has a symbiotic relationship with the development of human civilization.
So what got you folks interested in using it as like a building material or an application for some of your commercial work?
You know how it started was, as you mentioned, I've been in business now for 30 years, and over these years, green technology and green materials have come into the play for architects and contractors to work with. But with that came the laws of energy efficiency and how to tie it into the zoning and how to tie it into the construction process. And in the end, I always felt that it was contradicting the goals of the green industry, because the prices of materials, the prices of the projects were constantly going up, and the payback was not that great. It was a long-term payback. And at the same time, Alex was developing a business strategy to help start a new branch of my practice that was going to focus on a different way to think about using sustainable materials. So he proposed hemp. And of course I said, what? And it's not marijuana, right? That's very clear. Mm-hmm. But we decided, let's go learn about it. So the nuts and bolts of it is that we went out to Denver in Colorado to learn how to build. And the way we learned it was through a class that was run by Left Hand Hemp, people named Kelly and Allie, that teach people like us of all walks of life how to build it, how to mix it. And just by coincidence, Kelly had talked to a guy named Eric McGee, who is a hemp entrepreneur and developer of wanting to figure out how to bring hemp bioplastics into the snowboard industry. And he wanted to build this little workshop in his backyard. And it just, everything connected. We ended up, in the end, we built what we called the Wonder Workshop. It was a 16 by 20 post and beam structure. But the fact is, it was the first permitted Hempcrete structure in Denver. And the amount of press and the amount of activity and the amount of people that were attracted to it, it was really groundbreaking. And what it proved was that this cottage industry, this material that's been used out in the woods, out in the mesas, it could be a viable building product that could get a building permit in one of the most stringent areas of Denver. It was groundbreaking. I didn't realize it at the time, quite honestly.
Now you used the term hempcrete, I guess similar to concrete. Hempcrete is like what? Something you'd put a wall of a house up with, or Is it something you mix together with something else to create something that's like concrete? Is that the idea?
It's what it is that it's mixed very similar to concrete, where you have an aggregate and a binding material and water that come together. But the applications are very different. It is more like an infill material than an actual foundation material. You wouldn't want to use this for to build a house on it. But what it does do very well is that it's a really, really good insulation material. It's fire resistant, it's water resistant, it's resistant to pests and mold. It also passively regulates the temperature of the home because it's a very porous material. So that basically translates to rooms that are cool in the summer and warm in the winter.
So that's where the green side of it comes in. In
Yes.
addition to being a reliable building material, it also has all kinds of green benefits as well.
Right, but it's a misnomer of calling it hempcrete. It is not concrete. I mean, they have to be very clear.
Okay.
This is not a substitute for concrete. It's not, cannot be in the ground at this point. I can guarantee you in 10 years it will be. But it's strictly right now as an insulated wall material, but it takes, it's the wall. You don't have sheetrock, you don't have Tyvek, you don't have siding. You have studs, the way we're building it right now, but it's a composite material that takes all these other materials out of play. And all those other materials, like the fiberglass insulation or the foam, the spray and foam, all those are petroleum based. And we're doing it from a plant. Andrew, it's a plant, okay? You don't have to plug it in, you don't have to do anything. It's a plant. And I'm convinced that hemp is the material that the green industry has been waiting for. There's no baggage with it. It's so diverse.
Is it less expensive than some of the traditional materials that have been used up to now?
At the moment, the supply is very low because it's a very new material. So the supply chains need to be set up, and also you need you need access to the materials. So right now, it's not cost competitive with conventional materials, but as the industry progresses, which we've already seen over the past 2 years, and this has been a long time coming, where many very smart and dedicated people have been working at this for 30 years to bring hemp as an industry into the mainstream, which are starting to happen now. But yeah, down the road, once some of the legal and supply issues get solved, we believe that this will be on par with a lot of conventional materials, even price-wise, which that's when you could see this start to penetrate a lot of mainstream markets. That takes time, obviously, like nothing happens tomorrow, but this is closer to the 5-year mark than in the 10 years or 20 years like that. I mean, and again, this is like, what's been such a transformative experience for us is that Hempcrete is just one part of a much larger industry that's emerging. One of the reasons that we got so much attention for this is not only the proof of concept, but also the fact that this is, this is the cusp of what some are calling the first major commodity crop to emerge since the digital revolution, where from CBD to textiles to hemp seeds to even auto composites they're looking at. This is a much larger industry that's emerging, that's almost once in a generation. So and everything is interconnected. So as the industry grows and matures, you're going to see construction as well as dozens of other industries start to emerge, which it's been really exciting to watch that.
And at the same time, getting back to the cost, the hemp that we got for our building, we had to get from Europe.
Yeah.
From Europe.
Because until the 2018 Farm Bill goes through, which is pending any time now, you can only grow hemp through a pilot program. And that's going on, and it's expanding year by year.
Yeah,
Vermont's up to how many?
I believe it's 2,000. I mean, this has doubled from in the past few years. So the question of whether this is great, but are farmers going to grow it? Well, yeah, they are. I mean, this is especially the past few years, you've seen a big uptake in this. The pilot programs have been great as a way to jumpstart the industry and to get the research and attention to just start to be focused there. But unless you have an association with a specific university, it's very, very hard to be able to grow hemp on a scale that can be used for products. And this is the case, for not just construction, but textiles and hemp seeds and all the other things that go along with this. But yeah, once it starts to be able to compete with other commodity crops, which we're hoping once the Farm Bill passes, there's a provision in there that will allow that. That's when we get to see where the industry has a potential to grow.
So this Farm Bill, this is before the U.S. Congress.
Yes.
And the hope is that it will be passed at some point before the end of this year.
That's what we're hearing. I mean, this is a very complicated bill with a lot of provisions in it that have nothing to do with hemp. The hemp provision,
probably with agriculture or farming
yeah,
either.
Precisely. Right.
I would imagine.
Yeah, the hemp provision has been bipartisan.
Right.
Senator Sanders has been a big supporter of this, and Senator McConnell has too.
Interesting alliance of opposites
Yeah.
there.
Well, what's interesting is that the hemp industry at the turn of the century was largely set in Kentucky. That the bluegrass region has always been one of the hemp centers for the United States, especially during the Boston Harbor days, where they used it for rigging line and for masts and sails and whatnot. Yeah, most of it was grown from Kentucky. So there's a vested political interest in, for a state that really could use an alternative to tobacco.
So this used to be legal until the 1930s or 40s when all the hysteria about marijuana kind of kicked in and became illegal. So hemp was swept up in all of that and has remained kind of a banned substance ever since, even though, as you pointed out, a lot of applications for the product. So where do we stand now legally with it? Is it in some sort of gray zone between kind of being legal, but on the federal level it's not? Or what is our situation here?
In simply, yes. The cultivation and the purchasing and acquiring seeds is where the difficult part is. Once the raw material is put into is manufactured into a product, that's when stores can sell it, and not have to worry about. That's why you see hemp seed oil at Whole Foods without, the DEA coming and, arresting people. But again, when you look at the specifics of the law, it is in a gray area. But what the Farm Bill is going to do is to take it off of Schedule 1 and basically allow the states to regulate it for themselves, which is, I think, a really good start. Which that's, will allow hemp to compete with other commodity crops and not have to go through the legal and regulatory hurdles of that it has to now.
Okay.
It really was a political play back in the 30s to take it out of the market because of the lumber industry, the cotton industry, and
Paper is another one.
And it tied it to marijuana, of course, and that was perfect. So it got stopped. But during the war, it came back because, holy crow, look at what we can use with it.
Yeah,
and then illegal again. And then Nixon's war on drugs kept that going. And it's absolutely insane. There's no way you can get high from industrial hemp, period.
No THC or whatever.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of
ingredient.
people in and around the country that have been stealing hemp plants from the farms as they're growing, and they're finding out the hard way that they're getting caught for stupidity.
And no upside gain of any sort.
Absolutely.
They'd be disappointed. Yeah.
But tell me a little, before we get into some of the projects you guys have been doing with it, this business about a pilot program. If I'm a farmer with 5 acres in a field, kind of don't have anything going on right there, what can I just sort of say, hey, this sounds pretty good, let me plant these 5 acres with hemp. But I have to go through a process, I guess, with the Department of Agriculture here in Vermont to get a license or some kind of regulatory approval for that?
Yeah, Vermont's actually been really pretty good compared to the rest of the country about making the licenses available. But I mean, again, where it becomes problematic is that if you want to scale your farm, I mean, to do 1 or 2 acres is, not terribly, I mean, it's not by any means easy, but at the same time, it's not, it's not as difficult as if you want to do commercial farming with hemp. I mean, that's when the regulatory hurdles and the lack of supply chain and the sketchy legal framework becomes an impediment. So it's just, I mean, and again, farming is not is a profession where you have very slim profit margins in most cases. So again, any type of like worst case scenario might be one bad year might be enough to sink the farm. So it doesn't take a lot to scare farmers away from doing this. But once they have access to crop insurance and they can store their money in a bank that they make from this, that's when you have a foundation in which you can grow.
Yeah, because I guess right now they couldn't do that. But
yes,
it just certainly seems like we hear so much about, particularly the dairy side of the agricultural business in Vermont, like how it's struggling and fewer farmers involved in that. This sounds like might be an opportunity for some folks to kind of get into this and make a living out of it.
Well, and this is a really, I think, the opportunity that Vermont's been waiting for. That, and this is not just construction, but the hemp industry as a whole. Vermont is like, it's basically its economic identity is organic farming and high-value artisan products. This lends itself perfectly to that, where even if Vermont isn't the top raw material manufacturer, for the high-end manufacturing, similar to like the maple syrup and ice cream and craft beer, this lends itself absolutely perfectly to that. So you have the synergy with the Vermont brand doing what this small state has done well forever, like coming together in a really high value, high profit industry that really is very different from what we've seen before.
So tell us about some of these other, do you have other projects kind of in the pipeline in the wake of your project out there in Denver?
Yeah, it's, I couldn't believe it. After this one building that we did, the phone calls started coming in from all over the country on people wanting to build homes and outbuildings and structures on farms and whatnot. And we've been very careful to figure which are the right ones to go for and which ones are the appropriate ones to go for.
That's a nice problem to have.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah. And
We're playing the long game.
and that's true, because this is such a new industry. There's so many avenues to take, and also there's so many different directions coming at you, both good and bad. And so we want to focus on Vermont. At the same time, we've been to Oregon, we've been to Colorado, we've been to Kentucky. So, but we're learning about how the politics and how the farms and how the processing and the demand is going. And so, as a list, I've got 2 residential additions that are going to get ready for maybe 2 years from now out in Denver. I've got some work I've done out in Oregon on a vineyard to bring hempcrete as a feature material within a tasting room, as well as the landscape gardens around it. People have talked to me about some residential work down in Kentucky, Tennessee, New York State. But what we're focusing right now is sort of a 5-year plan of these small outbuildings that are of the Vermont brand, if you will. Because our goal when we went out to Colorado was to learn about hemp and hempcrete as a building material, but to bring it back to Vermont, the Northeast, but not have it look like an igloo or a stucco, building like you see out there, that so many of these are. How do we make it more colonial looking? How do we make it vernacular to the Vermont
and fit in with regional aesthetics, so it blends in type of thing. Because we've taken the attitude too that we're not just building a business, we're building an industry. Because right now in the early stages of this, and this is basically the case for any new industry, that you're all in this together. I mean, unless the supply chains get built and the public gets public awareness gets there, and you're not going to have an industry really emerge. So it's been a process of balancing the needs of the business, but also the needs of the industry. So we've been working with developing partnerships and working with talking to farmers and state regulators to really, build the infrastructure that will yield, a mass market hemp industry for not only Vermont but for the country.
We're trying to work from the top down to create demand. These small outbuildings that I've developed, one being a stable for horses, for 3 or 4 horses. It's actually gotten the attention of the state. We met with a representative from Senator Sanders' office. And the idea is that we're staying small structures that are easily permitted, can be used in type of areas, but it's an education of how these things are built, not only for people like us, but for the state officials, because they got to see it. Fire and safety, you know, they want to see what this material is.
Yeah, they need a lot of proof of concepts in order to be able to sign off on this as a mainstream material type of thing. So it's a sort of a chicken and egg scenario where you got to get stuff built in order to get it permitted and certified. But in order to get it certified and permitted, you got to build stuff and prove that it can be, you know, not going to fall down as soon as there's a light rain or something.
But we're taking it small scale, and it works. I mean, there's been buildings that have been built over in Europe, in Australia, South Africa, beautiful homes, some commercial in England.
They've had some looser regulations on this than the U.S. It's still a small industry there because some of the drug and narcotics laws are global. They're not just the U.S., but they've still cultivated a fiber market for hemp. But this is also part of a global transition too. I mean, and this is where there is a parallel to cannabis, that the social and political issues that are driving cannabis are also, you know, driving hemp, even though that they're, you know, they're very different, but they share a similar history type of thing. So the world momentum is going in a similar direction.
So speaking of which, we have some samples here.
We do, yeah.
I believe we wanted to show the folks out there what is this stuff?
Yes, this is hemp hurd. It can also be called short fiber or shiv. This is the primary raw material in hempcrete.
Looks like wood chips, basically.
It's very similar to wood chips. If you're the untrained eye might even see them as the same, but little do they know that it's a hemp wood chip, not a regular wood chip.
Okay.
But the cellulose content is very high in hemp. It's one of the richest concentrations of that found in nature. So that's where the properties and similarities have a lot in common with wood and all that. But it doesn't take 20 years to grow a hemp plant, unlike a tree. This is the bast fiber, or technical fiber. This is what's used in textiles and bat insulation that you can make out of hemp.
Okay.
As you can see, you can harvest both of these from the same hemp crop. So this is basically more of the skin of the plant, where this is the inner wooden shiv of the plant.
And this here this is what it winds up looking like?
Yeah, that's what.
It's all said and done?
Yeah, that's what this looks like once it's processed.
Into an insulation type fabric.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And this is just 3 of 25,000 things that hemp can be used for.
Basically anything made out of cotton, petroleum, or cellulose can be made out of hemp, which is estimated to be about 25,000 applications. This can be anything from bioplastics to textiles to auto composites to even hemp batteries. They're doing some research at the University of Alberta to they have some prototypes for a hemp supercapacitor, which is pretty interesting. A plant that could also be a battery. So
wow.
This is where the applications and the research going for this is going to open up new markets and new applications that aren't even really available right now.
So I was wondering, you mentioned, Bob, earlier that you get most of your raw materials now from Europe. It has to be imported into the U.S. I mean, would it be I'm assuming it would make it for a much easier thing if you could tap some domestic suppliers, and particularly folks right here in Vermont.
Well, that's our goal. I mean, and we're not just architects working toward building hempcrete structures. We're working with the state. We're working with farmers. We're trying to create a demand that the farmers will want to grow, so that people will come in to invest in processing plants, because we need a processing plant, which is basically they take the hemp after it's harvested, and it's fed through what is called a decorticator. And essentially, it's like skinning a snake. you get, this is the skin of the plant, this is the inner hurd. So that's what we get, but then all the flower, every other part is taken for other uses. But we need the decortication, we need the processing plant in order to have the product to go to the manufacturers, the raw material.
Yeah, one of the most promising aspects of like a mainstream hemp production is that from cultivation to end use, it's actually CO2 negative, which is even more than just CO2 neutral, which means that and Hempcrete it takes this to a new gear, but basically the whole process like sucks in sequesters more CO2 than it emits during the process. So on a large scale, this could potentially be a very, very useful tool for carbon sequestration. That hemp has one of the fastest CO2 to biomass conversion ratios found in nature, even more than agroforestry. So basically in one season, it's like growing a small forest that sequesters, a comparable amount of CO2 to that. So by producing and growing locally, that would basically shorten the supply chains and make it even more, not only energy efficient but also sustainable. And the carbon footprint would not only be zero but negative. Which,
wow.
Yeah,
that sounds like the win-win-win kind of thing. Well, that's fascinating, and I guess the amazing thing I find myself leaving this conversation with is like, why is it taking us so long to get to here? But anyway. I want to thank you both for being here today and sharing some of this with us. Certainly sounds like a interesting journey you're both on with this, and we'll look forward to having you back some other time to tell us how we've evolved since the first conversation. But we're going to have to leave that there for today. But I want to thank Bob and Alex Escher for being with us today to tell us a little bit about this fascinating, I can't say new product because it's kind of an old product, but maybe new for many people. And thank all of you for being with us as well. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we'll see you again the next time. Have a great day.